Embedded in 3 verses of Exodus is a 7-2-part divine name that Kabbalists say can heal, protect, and transform reality. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, a literal technology, encoded in plain sight for thousands of years, waiting for the one who would have eyes to see it. What you are about to hear is not a sermon. It is not a theology lecture. It is something older than both. It is a map, and if you follow it carefully, something inside you will never be the same. I want you to stop for a moment. Just stop. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something about why you are here, watching this right now, on this particular day, at this particular hour. You did not stumble onto this video by mistake. There is no such thing as a mistake in the grammar of the universe. The Kabbalists teach that every event carries a hidden address, a divine instruction embedded in the moment itself. And the instruction written into this moment is this: you are ready to hear what you could not have heard before. But before we go into that ancient mystery, I want to ask you something. If you have ever felt deep in the center of your chest that there is a layer of reality just underneath the surface of what you can see, a frequency just beyond what your ordinary senses can register. If you have ever had the bone-deep sensation that the world you walk through is only the outermost shell of something far larger and far more alive, then type the words "open my eyes" in the comments right now. Type it, because that feeling you have carried, that feeling you may have been embarrassed to admit, that feeling is not a fantasy. It is a perception. The mystics called it true seeing. And the technology we are going to talk about today was specifically designed for people exactly like you. If this channel has spoken to your soul before, please subscribe and tap the bell so that none of these teachings pass you by. The work we are doing together here matters. Now, let us begin where all real beginnings happen. In the dark. You know the feeling I am talking about. It is 3 in the morning and you are lying in the dark, and the weight of everything you cannot fix is sitting on your chest. The relationship that fractured, the door that closed before you could walk through it, the version of yourself you have been trying to become for years and somehow keep missing. You have prayed. You have tried. You have done everything the visible world told you to do. And still there is this gap, this aching, wordless gap between the life you are living and the life you know at some cellular level you were built for. Are you tired of trying every door only to find it locked? Have you wondered whether the universe is truly responsive to human need? Or whether prayer is simply the sound of a person talking to themselves in an empty room? Do you sometimes feel like the divine frequency is broadcasting on a channel you cannot quite tune into? No matter how hard you try, I understand that feeling. I have sat with it for decades. My name is Rabbi Elon Metzger, and I have spent over 50 years studying the sacred texts of Jewish mysticism. I am 76 years old. I have sat across from people in their deepest darkness, people who had exhausted every visible option, people who had prayed and tried and knocked and found nothing but silence on the other side of the door. I have watched students come broken and desperate and at the edge of what they could carry. I have accompanied people through loss so complete that it rewired how they experienced time itself. And in all those years, in all those conversations, in all those rooms filled with the particular despair of the person who has tried everything and found nothing, the question that returns more than any other is not a question about sin or worthiness or religious observance. The question is simpler than that. The question is there a language, an actual, operational language, that the divine speaks, that I could learn to speak back? The answer, according to one of the most carefully guarded traditions in the history of the human spirit, is yes. And the vocabulary of that language is exactly 72 words long. Let me tell you about a mountain in the Galilee. Not a large mountain, a modest hill. Really, above a small village called Meron. 19 centuries ago, a sage named Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai fled to a cave in that region with his son to escape execution by Roman authorities. The Talmud tells us that while they were in hiding, their clothes wore away from their bodies. So they buried themselves in sand up to their necks and spent their days in uninterrupted contemplation of the deepest mysteries of Torah. When they finally emerged, the tradition records that Rabbi Shimon's gaze was so intense, so saturated with divine light, that whatever he looked at would ignite. He had to return to the cave for another year until his perception softened enough to walk in the ordinary world without destroying it. The teachings that came out of that cave, transmitted first orally and then committed to writing by his disciple Rabbi Abba, became the foundation of the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, the central text of Kabbalistic mysticism, and within that text, among the deepest of its secrets, is an extended meditation on what Rabbi Shimon called the hidden name embedded in the splitting of the sea. That is where our story begins. Not in a cave, exactly, but in water, in a moment of absolute impossibility that became, for the Kabbalists, the template for all miracles that follow it. You know the story. The children of Israel have just left Egypt after generations of enslavement. They are moving through the wilderness, still learning what freedom even means. When they reach the edge of the Red Sea, behind them, Pharaoh's army is closing fast. Chariots, soldiers, the sound of hoofbeats getting louder. Before them, impassable water. They are trapped between annihilation and the deep. This is the moment the Kabbalists study most carefully. Not the miracle itself, but the mechanism of the miracle, because in the Torah's description of what happened in those 3 suspended minutes before Moses stretched his staff over the sea, something extraordinary occurs in the structure of the Hebrew text itself, something that no translator has ever been able to capture, because it is invisible in translation. It only exists in the original Hebrew, and it is the key to everything. In the 14th chapter of Exodus, verses 19, 20, and 21, there are 3 consecutive sentences describing the events just before the sea parted. The angel of God moving behind the camp of Israel, the pillar of cloud shifting its position, the wind beginning to blow. 3 sentences, 3 verses. And here is what makes these 3 verses unlike any other 3 verses in all of Torah. Each one contains exactly 72 Hebrew letters, not 71, not 73, exactly 72, all 3 of them. The probability of that being accidental is something that mathematicians and scholars have argued over for centuries. But the Kabbalists did not treat it as an accident. They treated it as an instruction. Listen carefully to what they found inside those verses, because this is where the technology reveals itself. If you take the first letter of verse 19, then the last letter of verse 20, then the first letter of verse 21, you get the first of the divine names, then the second letter of verse 19, the second to last letter of verse 20, the second letter of verse 21, and you get the second name. You continue this weaving, this precise interbraiding of the 3 verses, forward through the first and third and backward through the middle, until you have worked through all 72 positions. And what you end up with is 72 three-letter sequences. Not random sequences, not arbitrary combinations, sequences that the Kabbalists identified as resonance frequencies, specific vibrational addresses within the divine structure of reality, each one corresponding to a different quality of divine energy, a different channel through which the infinite makes itself available to the finite. The Zohar teaches that Moses knew these names. More than that, the Zohar says that Moses used them, that the splitting of the sea was not a passive miracle handed to a passive people. It was the result of Moses accessing a specific divine frequency, speaking a specific code, in a moment of absolute crisis, and that the name written into those 3 verses was the code he spoke. Stop right there. Let that settle. Moses did not wait for God to solve the problem and then report back to the people that everything was going to be fine. Moses engaged with the technology. Moses turned the key, and the water moved. That distinction matters more than it might seem, because it means that the tradition is not describing a universe where the divine acts unilaterally on passive human recipients. It is describing a universe where human engagement with divine frequency is part of the mechanism of the miracle. Not all of it, but a necessary part. And that means that your engagement right now with what you are learning in this teaching is not incidental to what might shift in your life. It is potentially central to it. Now, I need you to pause here, because I know what some of you are thinking. I can hear the voice in the back of your mind, the one that says ancient mysticism is beautiful as poetry, but we live in a world of reason and science and practicality. The 72 names of God are a fascinating piece of religious history, a curious artifact of a tradition that produced extraordinary literature. But technology, a tool, something that actually works in the real world, in your actual life, in the specific crisis you are in right now. I want to talk to that voice directly, because it is an important voice. It deserves a serious answer. Modern neuroscience has spent the last several decades discovering something that the mystics of every tradition have known for thousands of years, that focused attention on a specific object, held with intention and repetition, actually changes the physical structure of the brain. Not metaphorically. Literally, the neural architecture that processes perception and generates the states we call emotion and will and possibility is not fixed. It is plastic. It responds to what you repeatedly attend to. This is not a fringe finding. It is one of the most replicated results in contemporary cognitive science. Now, hold that fact in your mind alongside something else. The Hebrew letter system is not merely a writing system. Each of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet carries not only a phonetic value, but a numerical value, a pictographic meaning rooted in ancient Semitic script, and what the Kabbalists describe as a distinctive vibrational signature, a specific pattern of energy that the letter, when looked at or sounded, introduces into the consciousness of the one engaging with it. This is why the Kabbalistic use of the 72 names was never primarily about saying the names aloud. It was about gazing at the letter combinations, visual contemplation, focused attention directed at a specific 3-letter gate of divine energy. And when you combine what modern neuroscience tells us about the brain-changing power of focused attention with what the tradition tells us about the power embedded in these specific letter combinations, something interesting happens to the skeptic's objection. It does not disappear, but it gets more complicated. Is the 72 names system ancient spiritual technology, or is it superstition? Perhaps the real answer is that this is the wrong question. Perhaps the question the ancient mystics were actually answering was not about the mechanics of miracles. Perhaps the question was about the mechanics of access. How does a human being, living in the ordinary world of ordinary perception and ordinary limitation, access the layer of reality where the extraordinary is not only possible but inevitable? And the answer the Kabbalists gave is this: you need a key, and the key was embedded in 3 verses of Exodus by the hand that embedded everything. Let us talk about what these names actually are, what they are meant to do, and why the tradition teaches that different names open different doors. The Kabbalistic system understands the divine not as a single flat entity with a single mode of interacting with the world, but as an infinitely complex structure of qualities and energies, each one of which is available to human experience under the right conditions. Think of it this way: the sun does not send only one frequency of light toward the earth. It sends a full spectrum, and depending on the instrument you use to receive it, you might experience warmth, or you might experience visible color, or you might experience ultraviolet radiation that your eyes cannot see, but your skin most certainly can. The 72 names are, in the Kabbalistic understanding, instruments of reception. Each one is tuned to a different frequency of divine emanation, and by engaging with a specific name, you are not petitioning an entity in the sky. You are tuning yourself to a specific frequency that is already broadcasting, that has always been broadcasting, and that your ordinary consciousness simply does not have the bandwidth to receive without assistance. That changes everything about what it means to use these names. You are not asking, you are receiving, you are not begging. You are tuning, you are not hoping that something external will notice your need and choose to respond. You are aligning your interior instrument with a frequency that is constantly available, that has been broadcasting since before the world you live in existed, and that the tradition teaches will never stop broadcasting, because it is not a signal that depends on a transmitter that can break down. It is the signal that underlies all signals. The frequency that underlies all frequencies, the divine name woven into the structure of reality itself. Some of the names in the tradition are associated with healing, specifically with the kind of healing that comes not from fixing the outer condition, but from shifting the inner state that is generating the outer condition. The Kabbalists understood, long before modern medicine had the language for it, that many of what we call physical illnesses originate at a more subtle level of the system, and that addressing only the physical symptom without addressing its root is like treating the smoke without addressing the fire. Certain names in the 72 are described as keys to the healing frequency, the divine emanation of restoration and wholeness that is always available but rarely accessed. The tradition teaches that when a person engages with a healing name with genuine intention, what shifts first is not the symptom. What shifts first is the person's relationship to the illness, the quality of inner war or inner peace with which they carry what they carry. And from that shift, over time, other things shift, not always in the way that was expected, not always in the timeline that was hoped for, but always in a direction that carries the person toward greater wholeness than they would have reached without the engagement. Other names are associated with what the tradition calls protection, not the protection of walls and barriers, but something far more interesting, the protection of clarity. When you are able to perceive reality accurately, when you are not distorted by fear or pride or the accumulated residue of past wounds, you naturally move in alignment with the structure of things. You make different choices. You see threats before they fully materialize. You recognize the false path before you have gone too far down it. This is what the Kabbalists mean by divine protection. Not that something external shields you from all difficulty, but that something internal sharpens your perception until you can navigate difficulty with a kind of grace that seems, from the outside, almost miraculous. The protection of the names is the protection of an open eye, the protection of a mind that sees clearly enough to avoid what needs to be avoided and to walk toward what is genuinely calling to it. And then there are the names associated with what the tradition most cautiously, most carefully, describes as the transformation of reality itself. This is the claim that makes rational minds most uncomfortable. And I want to address it honestly. The Zohar, drawing on the account of the splitting of the sea, teaches that there are moments when the veil between the ordinary flow of events and the divine level that underlies that flow becomes thin. And in those moments, a person with access to the right frequency, engaging with the right name with the right intention, can participate in something that looks, from the outside, like a miracle. The Kabbalists do not claim this is easy. They do not claim it is guaranteed. They do not claim it is a technique for bending the universe to your personal wishes. What they claim is that the capacity exists, that it was demonstrated at the sea, and that the same technology that opened the water is still encoded in those 3 verses of Exodus, available to anyone with the knowledge and the sincerity to engage with it. That changes nothing and everything, because it means that the events of your life are not sealed. It means that the walls you are currently looking at are not necessarily permanent. It means that the sea that stands before you has, encoded in the very text that describes its parting, the key to its parting again. For you, in your crisis, in your specific, particular, unrepeatable life. Let me take you deeper into what the tradition says about the structure of these 72 names and why the number itself is significant. The Kabbalists teach that the number 72 is not arbitrary. It appears in the architecture of the divine structure repeatedly, because it represents a completeness, a full expression of divine creativity in the 4-dimensional framework that the Kabbalists use to map reality. The divine name that is at the center of Jewish tradition, the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God, when expanded and unfolded in a specific Kabbalistic technique, yields a total numerical value of 72. The 72 names are therefore not a list that exists alongside the divine name. They are the divine name, unfolded into its full range of expression, the way a single beam of white light unfolds through a prism into a full visible spectrum. Each of the 72 names is one precise wavelength of that full divine light, and each one of those wavelengths corresponds to something that a human being, in the full range of human experience and human need, might require access to: healing, clarity, protection, wisdom in impossible decisions, the courage to end what needs ending and begin what needs beginning, the perception to see through the appearance of things to the truth underneath, the capacity to love when love feels impossible, the ability to forgive, not because the wrong was small, but because carrying the wrong is a heavier burden than releasing it. Every human need, every dimension of human experience, covered, addressed. Given a frequency, given an address at which the divine light that answers to that specific need can be found, that is the architecture of the 72 names. Not a curiosity, not an artifact, a complete map of the frequencies available to you. Hear me carefully. Nothing. Now I want to give you something practical, not theoretical, something you can begin with today. Because the deepest wisdom in the world is useless if it stays in the air. The tradition has always taught that the entry point to the 72 names is not a long and complicated ritual requiring years of preparation. The entry point is a single, sustained act of honest presence. Here is what I mean. The ancient masters taught that before you engage with any of the divine names, you must first do what they called clearing the vessel, because you cannot fill a vessel that is already full of confusion and distraction and the noise of the day. Clearing the vessel begins with something almost insultingly simple. You sit in stillness, not the pretense of stillness while your mind races at full speed. Actual stillness. And you name, out loud or in a whisper, the single most pressing weight you are carrying right now. Not all your worries, not your whole life history of difficulty. Just the one thing that is sitting heaviest on your chest in this moment. You name it. You give it to the air, and then you deliberately, consciously, choose to set it down for the duration of what you are about to do. Not because the problem is solved, not because it does not matter, but because you have decided that for these minutes, you are going to access the level of reality that is larger than the problem. And you cannot do that while the problem is sitting directly on your chest. That is step one, naming and setting down. Step two is what the tradition calls the gaze. You take a single one of the 72 names and you write it out, by hand if possible, in Hebrew letters. And if you do not know Hebrew, you look at the letter shapes as visual forms. You look at them the way a painter looks at a landscape, not labeling the elements, not translating them, but receiving them. You hold your gaze on the 3 letters for 3 full minutes, not analyzing, not thinking about what they mean, simply looking with an open and receptive attention. The Kabbalists teach that the letters themselves carry the information. Your job is not to understand it with your mind. Your job is to let it pass through the gate of your gaze into the deeper levels of your system. 3 minutes, 3 letters, every day for 7 days. Which name do you start with? The tradition recommends beginning with the first name, which in Hebrew is composed of the letters Vav, Hey, and Vav. This name is associated in the tradition with the removal of what the Kabbalists call the filth of the past, meaning not moral failure, but the accumulated residue of old pain that distorts how you see the present. The sense that what happened before will certainly happen again. The heaviness of old wounds that colors everything new. The first name is a threshold. It cleans the window before you try to see through it. Step 3 is the declaration. After the gaze, you speak a single sentence out loud. You construct this sentence yourself, in your own words, in the present tense. Not a wish, not a prayer exactly. A declaration of what you are orienting yourself toward as though it already exists at the level of divine frequency, which according to the Kabbalists, it does. And your work is simply to bring your own frequency into alignment with it. The declaration might sound like this: wholeness is my inheritance and I am receiving it now. Or the door that belongs to me is already open and I am walking through it now. The specific words matter less than the present tense orientation and the quality of conviction you bring to speaking them. You are not trying to convince yourself. You are not engaging in wishful thinking. You are, in the Kabbalistic framework, adding your human voice to a frequency that is already resonating, turning the volume up on a signal that is already being broadcast. And here is the part of the practice most people skip, because it is the least dramatic and the most essential. After the gaze and the declaration, you write down, in a notebook you keep for this purpose alone, one concrete action you are going to take today. Not a grand gesture, not a complete solution, One step, the smallest step you can identify that moves in the direction of what you have declared. And then you take that step before the day ends. That is the Moses action. That is the foot in the water before the sea has parted. The practice does not work without the action. The frequency cannot flow through a person who is not moving. Water can only flow in a channel, and the channel of the divine in your life is constructed out of your daily choices to move. 7 days, one name, 3 minutes of gaze, one declaration, one action, morning, before the day gets its hands on you. That is the beginning. That is the threshold. And the Kabbalists teach that what happens in the 7 days after you begin this practice is not random. Pay attention. Because the tradition holds that the divine responds to sincere engagement, not with dramatic spectacle, but with what it calls path opening. Subtle shifts in the texture of your days that gradually become less subtle as you continue. Now, I need to tell you something about what this practice is not. It is not a substitute for action. The tradition is relentlessly clear on this point. Moses did not simply meditate on the divine name and watch the sea part from a comfortable distance. He stretched his staff over the water. He did the physical action that corresponded to the spiritual frequency he was accessing. The name gives you access to a level of reality, but you still have to move. You still have to make the phone call, have the conversation, take the step, do the visible thing that matches the invisible frequency you have aligned yourself with. The Kabbalists call this Hidori root, self-arousal, the human action that corresponds to and activates the divine response. You meet the divine halfway. The divine does not carry you to where you are supposed to go. It opens the path. You walk it. This is perhaps the deepest teaching hidden inside the story of the splitting of the sea. The children of Israel did not stand on the bank and watch miraculously dry ground appear before them. The Midrash, the rabbinic tradition of interpretive narrative, teaches that the sea did not split until one man walked in, until Nahshon, from the tribe of Judah, stepped into the water up to his neck, until human courage preceded divine response, until someone acted on the invisible reality before it was visible. That is the model. That is always the model. Engage with the frequency, take the human step, and watch what happens to the path before you. Are you still with me? Good? Because we are getting to the part that I suspect is the real reason you are here. You are not watching this video because you are casually curious about ancient Jewish mysticism. You are watching it because something in your life has reached a point where the ordinary solutions have run out. You have done the rational things. You have taken the reasonable steps, and there is still a wall in front of you that should not be there. A door that should have opened by now. A healing that has taken longer than any explanation can account for. And something in you, the part that does not fully trust the cynical voice, the part that remembers moments when something uncanny and unexplained shifted the weather of your life overnight. That part of you is asking, is there a deeper level I have not tried yet? Is there a frequency I have not yet accessed? The answer the Kabbalists give is not a comfortable one. It is not a quick fix. It is not a set of magic words that will rearrange your circumstances without your participation. The answer is more demanding than that, and more beautiful. The answer is that the universe is built with an extraordinary generosity at its foundation, that the divine did not design a closed system with a tiny number of access points reserved for the specially trained and the spiritually elite. The ancient tradition teaches that the names were embedded in the text precisely because they were meant to be found, that the technology was hidden in plain sight because it was meant to be used. not by a priesthood, not by an inner circle of initiates, but eventually, in the fullness of time, by anyone with the courage to look and the sincerity to engage. You are watching this because you have that courage and you have that sincerity. Let me say something to you now that is not a teaching. It is not an explanation. It is a word that comes from a different place than analysis. Someone watching this right now has been carrying a weight that no one in your life fully sees. You have become very good at appearing functional, at answering when people ask how you are with fine or getting there or managing, but there is a place inside you, a room that no one has walked into in a long time, where the real weight lives. And in that room there is a question you have been afraid to ask out loud because you are not sure you can handle the answer. The question sounds something like this: Am I worth healing? Am I worth the miracle? Has the door truly been closed for me? Or have I been standing in front of the wrong wall? I want to tell you something, that the 72 names of God, in the silence underneath all the mystical complexity, are actually saying, they are saying that the question of worthiness is not the right question. They are not names that you earn access to. They are not frequencies that become available only after you have fixed yourself enough. The Kabbalistic tradition teaches that the divine names were embedded in the story of a people who were not fixed, who had not earned anything, who were afraid and complaining and standing paralyzed at the edge of an impossible sea. And into that exact moment of unearned, undeserved human desperation, the technology was deployed. The frequency was accessed. The water moved, not because they deserved it, because they were there. And because Moses, in that impossible moment, knew which door to knock on. You are here. You are in your impossible moment. And I am telling you that the door still opens the same way. This is not the end of what the 72 names have to say about your specific situation. The tradition teaches that beyond the 7-day threshold practice I described earlier, there is a practice for crisis moments, for the exact moment when you are standing at the edge of the sea with the army behind you. The tradition calls it the moment of zero, the point where the ordinary options have collapsed and the only thing left is the frequency of the infinite. In that moment, the practice is not contemplation. It is what the mystics called the cry from the depths, a phrase borrowed from the 130th Psalm, Minha Mamakim, from the depths. And this is what that practice looks like. You do not try to be calm. You do not pretend to a serenity you do not feel. You sit with the full weight of the crisis. You let it press all the way down until it reaches the deepest part of you. And then you speak into that depth. Aloud if you are alone. In your mind if you are not. And the words, "The same power that split the sea is available to me now." You repeat it. Not as a chant, not as a mantra, as a statement of position. You are locating yourself in relation to a power that is larger than your problem. You are not begging. You are not bargaining. You are simply stating where you stand and to what you have access. And the Kabbalists teach that this is precisely the kind of engagement the divine structure of the universe responds to, because it is a statement of alignment rather than a plea of desperation. You are saying, I know the address. I know the frequency. I am here. I am tuned. Show me the path. After the declaration of position, you then do the most important and most difficult thing you choose to act. You take the next visible step in the direction of what you need, even if the sea is still water when you step in, especially if the sea is still water when you step in. Because the tradition is consistent and specific about this, the miracle meets the action. The frequency responds to the foot that moves. I want to say something now about the question of superstition, because I raised it at the beginning of this teaching and I owe it a direct answer. Is what we have been talking about today a spiritual technology or a superstition? Superstition, properly understood, is the belief that a specific physical action, a ritual gesture, an object, a formula spoken without engagement or understanding, automatically produces a result through a kind of mechanical causation that bypasses both the human interior and the divine intelligence. Break a mirror and 7 years of bad luck follow automatically. Carry a rabbit's foot and fortune smiles on you regardless of who you are or how you live. That is superstition. It is a system that operates outside the human person, requiring nothing from the inside. What the Kabbalistic tradition describes with the 72 names is structurally different from this in a crucial way. The tradition is emphatic that the names are not talismans. They are not automatic. They do not work on the basis of mechanical causation disconnected from the human interior. They work, the teachers say, on the basis of alignment. The name is a frequency. The gaze is a tuning instrument. But what gets tuned is the person engaging with the practice. And the result, if a result comes because the person has genuinely shifted their inner orientation, has genuinely accessed a different level of perception and possibility, and has genuinely taken action from that shifted place. The names change the one who uses them, and the one who is changed moves differently through the world. And the world, encountering a person moving with that quality of aligned clarity, responds differently. Not because of magic, because of physics, because of the deep grammar of how cause and effect operate at the level of consciousness, which the ancient mystics understood in ways that the modern world is only beginning to rediscover. Is it superstition? Only if you engage with it as superstition mechanically, passively, without interiority, without genuine transformation, without action, approached with sincerity and rigor and the willingness to actually be changed by what you encounter. It is something else entirely. Call it what you like. The Kabbalists called it the hidden technology of the soul, and they insisted that it was not a relic of the past but a living system, perpetually available, perpetually broadcasting, waiting for the human frequency to rise high enough to meet it. The Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who lived in the 16th century in the mystical city of Safed in the Galilee of northern Israel, spent years in solitude near the Nile before emerging to teach. He is considered the father of contemporary Kabbalah. He died at the age of 38, having spent only 2 years in Safed before a plague took him. But in those 2 years, the teaching that came through him changed the landscape of Jewish mysticism entirely. The core of his teaching was this: the work of the human soul is not merely to observe the divine, it is to participate in the divine, to be an active instrument in the ongoing process of tikkun, repair, the gradual bringing into alignment of the visible world with the infinite love that underlies it. And the tools of that participation, the primary instruments through which a human being engages with the structure of the divine, are the names, not in the sense of verbal labels, in the sense of resonant frequencies, access points, the specific addresses at which the divine can be found. Luria's approach to the names was not casual. It was the work of a lifetime, carried out in disciplines of purification and intention that most of us, living in the ordinary world of responsibilities and relationships and noise, cannot replicate in their classical form. But here is what Luria himself taught: according to his disciple Chaim Vital, that the principle is available even when the complete discipline is not. That even a single sincere engagement with a single name, made with genuine intention and followed by genuine action, opens something, not everything, not instantly, but something real, a hairline crack in the wall. And the tradition teaches that the divine can work with a hairline crack. You do not need to be a master of Kabbalah to begin. You need to be exactly where you are, which is sitting here, carrying what you are carrying, willing to try a door you have not tried before. That is enough. That has always been enough. I want to give you one more thing before we close. A piece of the teaching that I find most useful when I am working with someone who is in crisis, who is at that moment of zero. We spoke about earlier, who is standing at the edge of the sea with no visible path forward. The tradition teaches something about the structure of impossible moments that I believe is one of the most important ideas I have ever encountered. It teaches that every truly impossible moment carries within it a concealed gift. Not the gift of eventual resolution, though that often comes. The gift of the impossible moment is something more immediate than resolution. It is the gift of access, ordinary life, the life of manageable problems and reasonable solutions, does not create the conditions for accessing the deepest frequencies of the divine, not because God is absent from ordinary life, but because in ordinary life, we do not reach deeply enough to find what is always available. We do not press hard enough on the door. We do not need to. We manage with what we have on the surface. But impossible moments, the moments when the army is behind you and the sea is in front of you and there is nowhere to go, those moments create a pressure that drives you to press on doors you never knew existed. And those doors, it turns out, were never locked. They were simply never tried. Your impossible moment is not a punishment. It is an access point. The crisis that brought you to this video is not evidence that you are abandoned. It is evidence that you are being invited to a level of engagement with the divine that comfortable times do not generate. The tradition teaches this. The mystics of every century and every lineage teach this. And I am teaching it to you now because I believe that you can hear it and that you are ready to use it. Someone watching this right now knows, as you are listening to these words, that everything I have described is a perfect description of where you are. You have been in the impossible moment for longer than you thought was survivable. And you are still here. You are still upright. You are still watching. You are still, in the most precise sense of the word, seeking that survival. That stubborn seeking is not a small thing. In the Kabbalistic understanding, it is a form of spiritual heroism that the tradition has a name for chizuk, the strengthening of the self in the face of collapse. And the tradition teaches that chizuk, sustained against all odds, is one of the most powerful states from which the divine names can be engaged. Because it is the state of zero, the state where the ordinary has run out and the extraordinary is the only option left. You are in position. The frequency is available. The names are waiting. Begin with the first name. Write out the 3 Hebrew letters, or simply find them printed and look at them. Vau, Hey, Vav. Gaze at them for 3 minutes tomorrow morning before the day takes over. Speak your declaration of what you are aligning yourself with in the present tense. Write down the one action you are going to take today. Take that action, and then watch what the next day brings. Not with desperate scanning for the miracle, but with the quiet, expectant attention of someone who has placed a correct signal into a responsive system and is watching for the response with the calm of one who knows the system is real. 7 days, 3 minutes, 1 declaration, 1 action, every morning, and watch what happens to the wall. If this teaching has given you something today, I ask you to do 2 things. First, type your declaration phrase in the comments. Type the words, "The door belongs to me." Let those words sit in the record of this day, a public statement of where you are placing your orientation. Let others who are watching see that they are not alone in engaging with this. Let the comment section become what the tradition always intended, a community of seekers pressing on the same door together. Each one adding their voice to the frequency, each one increasing the signal of those who are listening with every word they type. Second, if you know someone who is in an impossible moment right now, someone who is standing at the edge of a sea with no visible way through, share this video with them today. Not because the numbers matter, because the human being on the other side of that sharing needs what you just received. And the tradition teaches that the act of sharing wisdom, of passing the key to someone who needs it, is itself an engagement with the divine names. It is itself a form of tikkun, repair. You become part of the mechanism of the miracle in someone else's life. May the frequency that encoded itself into 3 verses of Exodus and waited 3,000 years to be understood find you exactly where you are. May the door you have been pressing on open in the manner and at the moment that serves the deepest truth of your life. May the names that the ancient ones embedded in the story of an impossible crossing carry you across whatever water is standing between you and the fullness of what you were built to be. The technology is older than any of our doubts about it. The door was never locked. Behin.